action has been taken by Donald Trump to deal with a rogue regime
run
by ideological fanatics.
But
Where's
you
the
could
uranium?
Your friends in the Tehran regime can
wow.
tell you, because they won't tell me.
Wow. How are they my friends, Michael? Is it my name?
I'm
my
still
skin
I'm
color?
still
My
waiting.
religion? Which one is it? You lied to the audience at the podium when you said they were developing nuclear weapons. Tulsi Gabbard said in March they're not developing nuclear weapons. I guess she's also an Iran stooge. Trump is also an Iran stooge. I would point out to you, very important point. Very important point. There were 274 monitors from the IAEA in Iran up until Trump struck Iran. They were looking at nuclear facilities every day. How many monitors are in there today? How many IAEA monitors in Iran today, Michael?
There were 274 international monitors inside Iran's nuclear facilities, watching every single day. And then Trump tore up the deal, and that number went to zero. Zero. Not reduced, not scaled back. Zero. Mehdi Hasan asked Michael Gove that question live on stage at the Royal Geographical Society in London. And the pause before the answer told you everything you needed to know. Because when you cannot account for the monitors, you cannot account for the uranium, 400 kilograms of it, enriched to 60%, unaccounted for somewhere. Because the people whose job was to watch it are gone. This was not a cable news shouting match. This was a formal debate. The motion was whether Trump 2.0 makes the world a safer place. And Mehdi Hasan did not just win it. He walked Gove through his own framework, consequences and outcomes, and then used that framework to prove the answer is measurably, provably, no. From the goalpost pivot on gay rights, to the Narges Mohammadi moment that left the room speechless, to the audience member who asked the one question Gove had absolutely no answer for. This debate has layers that demand a full breakdown. If you think someone in media should follow the numbers wherever they lead, subscribe to Miller's mandate right now. We do not stop when it gets uncomfortable. I am Silas Miller. This is Miller's mandate. And zero is not just a number. It is a verdict. Now let's get into it.
I can answer that question. A president who I was not a big fan of, but did something very good in his last year in office, which the UK government also supported. I believe you were in the government that supported him when he did it, which is Barack Obama and the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear agreement, which actually put Iran's nuclear program under inspection, under control. How much uranium were they allowed to enrich under Barack Obama's deal that the British government of Theresa May supported, or David Cameron, I think it would have been still then in 2015? 3.67% was the level of enrichment that the US State Department and the IAEA signed off on under the Iran nuclear deal. Barack Obama did that deal. Donald Trump doesn't like Barack Obama, so as soon as he heard that Obama did that deal, he tore up the deal in 2018. His own defense secretary, James Mattis, said, don't do it, it's working. Some Israeli general said, don't tear it up. Trump tore up that deal, and that's where we end up today. That's exactly why they have nuclear enrichment at 60%, 400 kilograms of it. The entire crisis in Iran was created by a reckless, impulsive Trump throwing away that document that Barack Obama and the British government worked on. You were in the government.
How can you blame America for
tore up
Iran
the deal.
enriching uranium?
Because there was a deal.
It's the choice of the Iranian leaders. It's the choice of people whose response to public displays of homosexuality is hanging gay men from cranes.
Michael, have you ever spoken out against anti-homosexual laws in Saudi Arabia or any other Gulf countries?
Yes.
But they're our allies. Why do you use this bogus argument? The British government allies perfectly fine with lots of repressive governments who treat gay people badly. You know, and I know.
I am more than happy to, whether it's Uganda or Saudi Arabia. But I'm merely pointing out.
So we bombing Saudi Arabia?
The Iranian government that so many people are anxious to find excuses for.
Michael, should we bomb Saudi Arabia?
Is also one.
Can we come back?
Should we bomb Saudi Arabia? It's a simple question.
No, well, Saudi Arabia has not said that it's intent on wiping out another
so you've
nation.
moved the goalpost. Just now you said it was about gay people. I said Saudi Arabia treats gay people badly. Now you've moved the goalpost. Pick one.
I'm pointing out the nature of the Iranian regime that you seem so anxious, Mehdi, to defend.
I've not said a word of defense of Iran. You defended the Saudi government's treatment. I didn't say a word about it.
I haven't defended the Saudi
government. They all heard you
say move the goalpost. I want to come back to this question.
I just find it instructive that
Michael,
Mehdi is so
Michael,
angry.
Hold on.
hang on,
No,
Mehdi
you
and Michael.
no, Ritali,
Hang
just
on.
made a
Draw
shot
your
against
own
me, so I-
conclusions, ladies and
So hold on. William Hague, who was the leader of your party, the foreign secretary, wrote an article in the Times where you used to write, saying that this action will more likely lead to a bomb than anything else. Is he also an Iran stooge, Michael?
So that's the specific point I wanted to put to
This
you,
is a
Michael.
ridiculous
Are we in a
claim.
position where nuclear proliferation is more likely rather than less
100%.
likely?
No.
That's just
And
flat
why?
wrong.
Why would you say
The
that?
IEA disagrees with you.
Because action has been taken by Donald Trump to deal with a rogue regime
Where's the
run
uranium?
by ideological fanatics who
Where's the
wanted to
uranium?
eliminate.
Where's the uranium, Michael?
Who wanted to
Hang on,
eliminate
let him speak.
Israel.
But
Where's
you
the
could,
uranium?
Mehdi, you could argue.
Well, again, maybe your friends in the Tehran regime can
wow.
tell you, because they won't tell me.
Wow. Wow. How are they my friends, Michael? Is it my name?
I'm
my
still
skin
wa- I'm
color?
still
My
waiting.
religion? Which one is it?
I'm still waiting for any criticism of them.
I'm happy to criticize them. I think Iran is a
good.
country with a horrible human rights abuse and shouldn't be developing nuclear weapons, which the US government, by the way, of Trump said they are not developing nuclear weapons. You lied to the audience at the podium when you said they were developing nuclear weapons. Tulsi Gabbard said in March they're not developing nuclear weapons. I guess she's also an Iran stooge. Trump is also an Iran stooge. I would point out to you, very
Why were
important
they
point.
enriching
Very
the
important point.
uranium?
Very important point. There were 274 monitors from the IEA in Iran up until Trump struck Iran. They were looking at nuclear facilities every day. How many monitors are in there today? How many IEA monitors in Iran today, Michael? Zero. None. Trump's made the world less safe.
Believe. I don't know whether it's naivety or misdirection, but if you believe that IAEA monitors are the way to ensure that Iran is not going to develop a nuclear weapon, when you've already acknowledged that the rate at which uranium was being enriched was significantly higher over
Because he tore up the deal, the guy you loved.
No. It's because of the intent of Iran. It is because of the intent of
people
that
Mehdi,
regime.
you have to acknowledge that what we've seen, with or without Trump,
Yeah.
is the limits of multilateral organizations.
How?
And actually, you've got a president who is willing to grasp difficult issues and take them in a direction of his choosing.
Rachel, I respect that you're the moderator and you have to ask that question, but you know very well, every non-proliferation expert agrees that those strikes did not help with non-proliferation. The IEA have come out and said it didn't help. And by the way, the
What did
uranium,
the Secretary General of NATO
the
say?
uranium is missing. You mean the former Dutch Prime Minister who sends texts to Donald Trump in caps locks, sucking up to him like you do? Great, what a credible source you have there. Most nuclear experts look at the uranium missing and say, hold on, we had a deal where they were enriching at 3.67%, supported by David Cameron and Michael Gove, supported by Barack Obama. Trump tore it up. They started enriching more. Then we bombed them, so they hid the uranium. Given we bombed them, they're more likely to now want a nuclear weapon because they see North Korea, where Trump loves North Korea. They say, we want to be like North Korea.
One more question.
Trump loves North Korea. Do you love North Korea?
One more question to you, Michael.
Your
I'm going
friends
to
in
open it to the floor, which is, Michael, if this is a president who wants to end wars, why do you think he treats his allies so inconstantly, so unpredictably? And where does that leave? If you were in government now, how would you handle President Trump?
Well, the first thing to say is, contrary to Mehdi's mischaracterization, when it comes to multilateral organizations that have kept the peace, I would prefer NATO over the IAEA any day. And the current Secretary General of NATO, I mean, I know that Mehdi might think that being Dutch Prime Minister is somehow a disabling
He's
factor.
not a non-proliferation expert, Michael, is my point. The IEA chief is.
Well, NATO has more successfully kept the peace than the IAEA for decades.
Well, the IEA
and I
was
think
right
that the
about Iraq
Secretary
and
General of NATO may know rather more about diplomacy in the military than either Mehdi or I, and it's his conclusion that the strike on Iran made the world safer. So
And if you could answer the
I merely
question,
point
if you
that
were in
out.
government now, how would you deal with a president who is not always very kind, to put it politely, to his allies?
In the same way as I would have treated President Obama or President Clinton or President Nixon or any US president. You have to recognize that an American president is naturally going to pursue the national interest of their own nation. And where someone is leading that country who is inclined to be in the historic tradition of an ally, work with them, but where you disagree, say so.
Okay, now I'm going to open it up to all of you for questions. I know there's lots of real passion out there. Please ask questions, don't want speeches. Michael has to go at 7:30, so if you've got a question specifically for him, that would be great. I'll begin with those. I'm going to start, I can see a couple of hands up on the right-hand side, so I'm going to start over here. I think you're going to go to the first one. There's a couple at the back there, and then we'll go round. And I know you guys, I will come to you up there as well. I'm going to take two, yes.
Thank you very much. My question is for Michael, who mentioned Iranian gays. You said that the Iranian regime treating them badly. Yes, very badly, even sometimes put them in the jail. And during this strike, Israeli government striked Iranian prisons. During the visit time, killed most than 50 persons in one go. Most of them, the families, and they were LGBTQ community. Yep. How killing gays are helping them? How you're mentioning Iranian gays now in this conversation?
Okay. And there's a question at the back there as well. If you can ask questions, that would be great. There's a gentleman with his hand up right there.
Mr. Gove, do you wish you'd properly prepared for this debate now?
Okay, I'm going to take one more. There's one over there on the right.
Mr. Gove, did I understand you correctly? You said we're not to pass judgment about Mr. Trump based on his morals, but solely based on the outcome of his actions. Is that now, with all the talk about shared value, is that now your view? Morality does a lot of heavy lifting here. Is it an irrelevance, in your opinion, whether a leader of a nation has respect for the rule of law and whether he is a man of integrity?
Okay, thank you. Michael.
Well, on those 3 points, on the first point, it is the case that the Iranian regime has done terrible things to its people, which is why almost every Iranian diaspora organization wants to see it go, and why there was such widespread support for what was, as Mehdi points out, an American assault against Iran, but one which was cheered on the streets by Iranian refugees worldwide. On the second point, I'm prepared for anything, even the criticism that comes from people who disagree with me profoundly. And on the third point, when we're thinking about foreign affairs and diplomacy, of course one can think about a moral dimension, but inevitably, when we're judging whether or not the world is a safer place, one has to look at consequences, events, and numbers rather than passing a moral judgment, because there are very, very few world leaders whom one would happily consider to be eligible either to be one's confessor or one's brother, or whom one would wish to see come home and marry into one's family. It's in the nature of world leaders that they operate, particularly when it comes to diplomacy and conflict, in a morally compromised world. What we therefore need to do is to look clearly at what the difficult alternatives are with which they are dealing, and also look at the consequences of their actions thereby.
Let me respond briefly to two things. One is, on the morality point, I actually agree with Michael. I don't think you can put the morality as a standard. I happen to think it is immoral the way Donald Trump behaves on the international stage when he says he refuses to call Putin a dictator but calls Zelensky a dictator. I have a problem with that. But I agree, it is about actions and consequences. Michael mentioned numbers. I agree, which is why I mentioned the numbers from Yemen, from Gaza, from Iran. I mean, the problem is, Michael likes to use Iran as a prop with which to beat his opponents, but he doesn't actually care about the Iranian people. He said the Iranian people were joyous about these attacks. Actually, the Iranian opposition movements were absolutely opposed to this. Narges Mohammadi, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, was in prison in Iran, came out and said no. Prominent Iranian dissidents said this is not the way we want to get freedom in our country, on the back of Israeli and American bombs, which killed multiple innocent Iranians. Residential apartment buildings blown up, car bombs going off. If you think that makes the world a safer place, then you really just don't value Iranian life. You don't value Palestinian life. That's the fundamental problem.
Let's start with the number that ended the debate before the debate was officially over. 274. That is how many International Atomic Energy Agency monitors were inside Iran's nuclear facilities, on the ground, watching, every single day. right up until the moment Trump launched the strikes. Verifying enrichment levels, documenting activity, providing the international community with the one thing that makes non-proliferation policy actually function. Real-time information about what is happening inside the facilities. After the strikes, zero. Not reduced, not restructured, zero monitors, zero visibility, zero accountability for what happens next inside those facilities. And 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% compared to 3.67% under Obama's deal, unaccounted for, somewhere, because the architecture designed to track it was dismantled by the same administration now claiming the world is safer. Michael Gove stood on that stage and argued consequences matter more than morality. Fine. Those are the consequences. Measured, documented, sourced from the International Atomic Energy Agency itself, the institution whose entire reason for existing is to know exactly where that uranium is. Now let's talk about how we got here, because the path from 3.67% to 60% has a specific author, and his name needs to be said clearly. In 2015, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China negotiated the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran. Under that agreement, Iran's enrichment was capped at 3.67%. 274 monitors were on the ground. The International Atomic Energy Agency signed off on it. James Mattis, Trump's own Secretary of Defense, said, "Do not tear it up. It is working." An Israeli general said the same thing. The British government under David Cameron and Theresa May supported it. Trump tore it up in 2018. Here is the accountability timestamp that nobody in the mainstream coverage wants to sit with. Trump did not tear up that deal because of new intelligence. He did not tear it up because Iran had violated the terms. The International Atomic Energy Agency certified Iran's compliance repeatedly. Trump tore it up because Barack Obama made it. That is the documented record. That is what the receipts say. And every degree of escalation that followed, every percentage point of additional enrichment, every lost monitor, every kilogram of unaccounted uranium traces directly back to that single reckless decision made for personal and political reasons that had nothing to do with American national security. Michael Gove spent an entire debate trying to argue around that chain of causation. Mehdi Hasan would not let him, and neither will this channel. If you are a working-class American watching this debate from across the Atlantic and wondering what any of this has to do with your life, let me be specific about that connection. Because it is not abstract. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply moves through the Strait of Hormuz. Every military escalation in that region, every miscalculation, every strike that pushes Iran closer to nuclear capability and further from international monitoring, gets priced into the barrel of oil that determines what you pay to drive to work, to heat your home this winter, to buy groceries that were shipped somewhere before they reached the shelf. The decision to tear up the Iran nuclear deal in 2018 did not stay in the Middle East. It traveled directly into the economic lives of working-class Americans who had no vote on it, no voice in it, and no cushion to absorb the consequences of it. The people who made that decision did not feel those consequences. They never do. The people who felt them were already stretched thin before the first ripple hit. That is not a talking point. That is the direct economic thread that runs from an Oval Office decision through a destabilized region, straight to your kitchen table. And every politician who defends that decision as strategic boldness should be required to explain it to the family that could not fill the tank that week. Now, let's name the goalpost moment. Because it is one of the most important things that happened in that debate. And every working-class viewer needs to be able to recognize this move when they see it again. Because they will see it again. Gove opened his human rights argument with Iran's treatment of gay people. Documented atrocities, real. Nobody serious disputes Iran's catastrophic human rights record. Mehdi asked one question. Should we bomb Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia, which criminalizes homosexuality, which has executed people for it, which operates a guardianship system that treats women as legal minors, which is the recipient of billions of dollars in American and British weapons, which is the country whose crown prince ordered the assassination of a Washington Post journalist and faced zero meaningful consequences from this administration. Gove's answer, they are our allies, is one of the most revealing confessions in the entire debate, because it exposes the framework completely. The human rights argument is not a principle. It is a weapon. It gets aimed at enemies and holstered when it comes to allies. The suffering of gay people in Iran is a rhetorical prop, deployed to justify military action, and immediately abandoned the moment you point at a country doing the same thing that writes us checks. Mehdi named that live, in real time, in front of an audience that heard every word, and Gove's response was to shift the argument entirely. Suddenly, it was not about gay rights anymore. It was about Iran wanting to eliminate Israel. Mehdi called it immediately. You moved the goalpost. Just now, you said it was about gay people. Pick one. That is what intellectual accountability looks like at its sharpest. No performance, no theatrics, just the specific claim, the specific pivot, named out loud with the audience watching. And Gove had no answer, because there is no answer. You cannot keep changing your justification every time the previous one collapses under pressure and expect nobody to notice. Somebody noticed. Somebody always notices. That is why this channel exists. Now let's talk about Narges Mohammadi, because this is the moment that did not just win the debate, it ended it morally. Gove claimed the Iranian people celebrated when the strikes happened, that ordinary Iranians welcomed the bombs, that the operation had popular support on the ground. Mehdi responded with a name, one name, Narges Mohammadi. Here is who she is. Narges Mohammadi is an Iranian human rights activist who has been arrested multiple times across 2 decades for her work inside Iran. She has spent years in Iranian prisons. She received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2023, while she was still behind bars. The Iranian government would not release her to collect it. Her prize was accepted on her behalf. This is the most decorated human rights voice inside Iran, a woman who has paid personally and repeatedly for standing against the Iranian regime, speaking from inside an Iranian prison at the exact moment these strikes were happening. And she said no. She said this is not how we want freedom, not on the back of Israeli and American bombs, not through strikes that hit residential apartment buildings, not through attacks that killed members of the LGBTQ community in an Iranian prison. The exact people Michael Gove had spent 10 minutes claiming to champion. When Gove says the Iranian people supported these strikes, and the Nobel Peace Prize laureate who was sitting in an Iranian prison at that moment publicly says the opposite, his argument does not weaken. It collapses. You cannot claim to speak for the Iranian people, while the most recognized Iranian human rights voice in the world is on record contradicting you. There is no rhetorical recovery from that. There is only the silence Gove had left when Mehdi finished, and then the audience question that nobody on that stage was ready for. A man stood up. He identified himself as part of the Iranian community. He said the strikes hit a prison. He said more than 50 people died in that single strike. He said those killed included members of the LGBTQ community. And he asked Michael Gove directly, You spent this entire debate talking about Iranian gay people. How does killing them help them? Look at Gove's face in that moment. That is not a man with a prepared answer. That is not a man who built his argument with the full weight of its consequences in mind. That is a man who used the suffering of a marginalized community as a debating point, and then got confronted by a person in that room whose community absorbed the direct human cost of the policy he spent an hour defending. The room felt it. The applause that followed was not enthusiasm. It was recognition. The recognition that someone had finally said the thing the entire debate had been circling without landing on. You said you cared about Iranian gay people. The bombs you defended killed Iranian gay people in a prison during a strike. That is not a debate loss. That is a moral reckoning. And Gove had nothing, because there is nothing to say. Now here is the bigger picture that this debate was really about. Underneath the specific arguments, underneath the numbers and the names and the pivots. The logic Gove was defending in that room is the same logic being used every single day in Washington. The idea that military force creates safety, that destroying infrastructure, eliminating oversight, removing the international monitoring architecture that was verifiably working, somehow reduces a nuclear threat rather than accelerating it. Here is how nuclear deterrence actually works. When a country watches what happened to Libya, which surrendered its weapons program and then got destabilized anyway, or Iraq, which was accused of having weapons it did not have and got invaded, and then watches what happens to North Korea, which kept its weapons and has never been militarily struck, the strategic conclusion is not hard to reach. A nuclear weapon is the one guarantee that nobody touches you. That is not propaganda. That is the documented strategic logic of every non-nuclear state watching American foreign policy in real time. Mehdi named it directly. They were enriching at 3.67%. The deal got torn up. They started enriching more. Then they got bombed. So now the uranium is hidden. And the next government that watches this sequence, in whatever country is paying attention, looks at North Korea and draws the obvious lesson. Trump did not make Iran less likely to want a nuclear weapon. He gave Iran the single most compelling argument for having one, and the 274 people who were watching the facilities to make sure that did not happen are gone. Here is where we land. Mehdi Hasan did not just win a debate at the Royal Geographical Society. He demonstrated, with documented numbers, with named sources, with the testimony of a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, with an audience question that left a former British cabinet minister speechless, that the motion was not just wrong, it was dangerously, measurably, provably wrong. 3.67% to 60%. 274 monitors to 0. A deal that James Mattis said was working, torn up because the man who built it was Barack Obama. 400 kilograms of uranium, somewhere, unmonitored, because the accountability architecture was dismantled by the same people claiming victory. That verdict belongs to the working-class families who will absorb whatever comes next, not to the people who made the decision, not to the politicians defending it on debate stages, to the people with the least cushion and the most skin in the game, who were never asked. This channel exists for those people. Share this video. Put it in front of someone who still believes the strikes made us safer. Subscribe to Miller's Mandate, because we are going to keep following these numbers until someone in power is required to answer for where that uranium is. I am Silas Miller. 274 monitors to 0. I will keep saying that number until it means something to the people who caused it.